Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fantasy Life's 2024 team preview of your Washington Commanders. Inside, you'll find 3 interesting things you need to know. We'll get into the offensive philosophy, what the betting markets are saying, the deep sleeper to potentially target in your drafts, position battles that need most monitoring, who are the beat writers we should follow, and who we think the Commanders would be if they were a TV or movie character. So all that and so much more. Again, give us 30 minutes, and we'll get you fully acquainted with your Washington Commanders. I'm Ian Hartitz, and joining me as always to accomplish this task, none other than Fantasy Life Director of Analytics and all-around baller, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, we've hit the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants, rounding out the NFC East now with the Commanders. So unlike, not to keep throwing strays at the Giants, but yeah, let's face it, unlike the Giants, we do have, I think, a little more reason for optimism, because whenever you happen to use one of those top 5 shiny picks on a quarterback who just so happened to win the freaking Heisman Trophy, you can usually find at least, again, more so of a reason to have a glass half full outlook on the squad. So let's start with that, man. Dwain, do you think that Jayden Daniels can actually become the first truly good long-term Washington QB since just the Heisman, I guess? Are we going back that far, with all due respect to Doug Williams?
I'll just take an RG3 rookie season. I know the Commanders fans want more. They want an encore from that, but like that's my closest comp for this guy. I mean, Ian, for fantasy purposes, I'm all in on Jayden Daniels this year. I mean, we're talking about a guy that has a 14% scramble rate during his time in college. That is absolutely elite. 17% of his team's design rushing attempts for a college player at quarterback. That is also elite. So I think we're going to see a guy that comes in, and I don't know that he'll get on a Lamar Jackson workload or not, but somewhere around there. And are we going to say he's going to be as good as Lamar? No, but if he's slightly less than that, like 700 rushing yards, like, man, that's on the table. Like, that could happen. And you and I both know anytime you have a chance to be 600-700 rushing yards, it is super, super hard to not be a top 12 fantasy quarterback. Actually, it's really hard to not be a top 10 quarterback. And look, it pays to have a type when we talk about quarterbacks in fantasy football. We want the guys that can run the football. And then if Jayden Daniels suddenly does show to be the kind of passer that we saw over his last 2 years at LSU, where he really blossomed in that department. Now, this is an older player, didn't necessarily do that early on before he transferred over to LSU, but all we can do is go off of the last couple of years. And this is a guy that absolutely put up some monster yards passing as well. At a minimum, we have to be excited. Maybe is this finally it for your guy, Ian, Terry McLaurin?
Maybe, man. Please. This generation's Andre Johnson and Allen Robinson, like just one mediocre quarterback after another. Not saying Terry's as good as Andre Johnson necessarily, but my God, DJ Moore, you can still put him in that conversation, but he finally got over 1,300 yards with Justin Fields. Please, free Terry. But yeah, man, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. We just don't see quarterbacks that are going to be rushing as much as we're expecting Daniels to bust in fantasy land. So overall, last 10 years, there have been 27 quarterbacks with at least 100 carries. Dwain, 24 of the 27, 89% ended up putting top 12 numbers on a per game basis. I'm not even sitting here and, doing the bullshit where I take the totals and just reward all the guys that played 17 games. 89% were top 12, 59% were top 6, 41% top 3. Even the ones that, weren't able to finish, inside the top 12. 2020 Cam on that, just lost Patriots team. 2018 Lamar was there when he was just starting, but his stats are a little bit skewed because he was, kind of a wildcat guy for Joe Flacco first half of the year. Then 2014 Colin Kaepernick, who just, at least at that point, wasn't really getting much going through the air. So again, Fantasy Life projections right now have Daniels for 122 rush attempts, and they could go a long way, man. 14.5 fantasy points per game from just rushing during his final collegiate season. I mean, Kyler Murray was at 12.3 during his final season at Oklahoma. Anthony Richardson, who is going QB5 right now, is only at 10. So, man, Dwain, if you have to look at the top of the quarterback position, yes, we're paying up for Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson. If you can't get those guys, Kyler Murray is going to be your next cheapest option, but the cheapest dual threat quarterback with the potential to rise up into that conversation, it's pretty easily Jayden Daniels.
Yep. And I think you could make an argument that he should be going closer to Kyler Murray. I still think he's a cheat code right now in drafts. Being able to get him in round 9, and that's best ball. He's going to go a little bit later than that in redraft, where some people will only draft 1 quarterback.
Yeah.
Right. They're not everybody's going to draft 2. And in best ball, a lot of people are drafting 3. So that's going to push quarterbacks down some. So yeah, I think he is just one of my favorite picks overall. And anytime I get in a jam at quarterback, even if I don't have McLaurin or I haven't set up a stack, I just feel so comfortable because I look at it. And again, it's about, what can I not get later in the draft? There's not another Jayden Daniels. Right. Justin Fields is it, but we have no clue when Justin Fields is going to get on the field. I think you and I both agree at some point he probably does this season, but we don't know if it's going to be 3 games. It's going to be 7 games. It's going to be 1. Like in what week is that going to be? We don't know. So with Jayden Daniels, we know he's the starter. We know he gives us this dual threat upside. I'll just tack on to what you said, Ian, but going back to 2011, 100 or more rushing attempts, just forget everything else. Right. And threw for under 3,500 passing yards. Because I'm assuming, even though he was a prolific passer at the end of his college career, I'm going to assume he's still a rookie. Okay. We've got some things we need to iron out. So this is not going to be a great passing offense. I might be underrating the passing offense, but I've got them around 3,400 yards passing, 20 passing touchdowns. So quarterbacks that 100 rushing attempts, but didn't get to 3,500 passing yards, they still averaged 20.3 fantasy points per game and averaged a QB8 finish. You have to be drafting this man. Like this is one of the this is still in a world where it's hard to honestly find super value picks anymore because the market is getting so sharp because so many drafts are happening. Jayden Daniels might be the premier guy that's still probably getting underdrafted.
The late round quarterback of 2024 at a minimum, because he's not a perfect prospect. Dwayne and I aren't sitting here saying that, oh, congrats, Washington.
It doesn't matter. That's the thing. He doesn't have to be.
Doesn't matter. When Taysom freaking Hill got spot starts over the years, he was a QB1. Tim Tebow, we still laugh at the way he threw a football. Guess what? When he got a chance to be the starting quarterback, he was a QB1 out there. I mean, the problems with Jayden Daniels, Dwayne, if we had fantasy football leagues where we were actually subtracting sacks from a quarterback's total, maybe that's a new conversation, but as far as I can see, that is not the regular scoring setting. So again, biggest issues with Daniel from a real life perspective is the fact that his pressure to sack ratio is really in scary territory. I mean, 147 quarterbacks with 50 plus pressure dropbacks last year. My man's was 144th in terms of the amount of those that actually turned into a pass attempt. So really did profile as more of like a 1-2. Okay, I'm under pressure. I'm just taking off right now. That's great in fantasy land. We'll take scrambles over checkdowns, man, 8 days of the week. And then just in terms of his ability to throw over the middle of the field, certainly didn't see enough of it at LSU to conclude that he can do so at a high level in the NFL. So verdict still very much out, and if Daniels will be a great real-life quarterback, but Dwayne and I awfully confident he will be a pretty fantastic fantasy signal caller from day one. Also, a new addition to this Washington offense, Dwayne, the not quite reigning, but 2 years ago, number 1 RB in all fantasy football, Austin Ekeler, although he might be a number 2 in this backfield with Brian Robinson. So how do you see this split actually shaking out, Dwayne? Because I will say both Anthony Lynn and Kliff Kingsbury, who are going to be running this offense, have a history of enabling multiple productive RBs inside the same offense. Anthony Lynn in 2019 had Ekeler and Melvin Gordon as top 15 running backs. And Kingsbury, man, in 2020 and 2021, Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds were both top 32, and James Conner and Edmonds were both top 26. So, hey, that's not breaking the game. But when both Ekeler and Robinson are priced outside the top 30, man, there might be some upside here at cost.
Yeah, I like both of them at their current price. I don't necessarily favor drafting either one of them. Like, I'm fine drafting either. It's not one of those backfields where I have a strong take saying, oh, it's this guy or it's that guy. I do think that Austin Ekeler has the most upside if for some reason last year was really all about the nagging, ankle injury that he got early in the season. And maybe the efficiency isn't as bad as we think. And the only reason is because the cheat code for quarterbacks we just talked about is the scrambling and the rushing, the design rush attempts. So what's the cheat code for running backs? It's catching the ball. Yeah. And that's not Brian Robinson's thing. It's not that he's not good, but Austin Ekeler very recently was an elite pass catcher out of the backfield. So if somehow this shakes out in a way where Robinson goes down, Robinson fumbles or something, and Austin Ekeler suddenly gets in the driver's seat, I think his upside is higher because he has the more complete profile and we know what he can do in the passing game. Now, some of that might go away because, to our point, Jayden Daniels might just be like,
Yeah.
Sorry, Ekeler. Just stand back. Young Buck's just going to take off with the ball and do his thing. So that's probably going to hurt Ekeler a little bit, but I still think he's got the biggest ceiling. Right now, I've got this projected as 45% of the carries to Brian Robinson Jr. Again, folks can go check that out over at fantasylife.com. We've got all the projections up. We're updating those every single week at this point. 35% of the rushing attempts to Austin Ekeler. The average running back one, not running back one in fantasy, running back one on an NFL roster over the last 3 years has been a 57% share of the rushing attempts. So obviously I've got both of these guys under that and more of a, honestly, like a 1B, 1C, not even a 1A, 1B, right? It's like 1A, 1C, the way these guys are splitting it. I do think that they brought Austin Ekeler in to take the passing down work. I think he'll take the 2-minute offense. Probably takes a lot of the long down and distance work. If they're getting just trailing game scripts, period, I think you'll see more Austin Ekeler.
Now, on the other side of the coin, as we saw when Ekeler was at the true height of his, fantasy superpowers, it was the pass down work and a lot of the goal line stuff. Yeah. That's probably going to Brian.
But he was good on inside the 5. So I think people that are immediately discounting him from getting that work, because we just know how coaches can be. Yeah. Like if Brian Robinson fumbles once at the 1-yard line, like coaches will just be like, oh, Ekeler, you're good. And then Ekeler goes in and scores a touchdown the next play inside the 5. And then suddenly Austin Ekeler has the goal line carries. The point is Ekeler has shown he can be good in that role. He's not your typical small, just passing down back. Right. He's actually a guy that's bulked up. I mean, he's huge. Like when you watch his workout videos, this dude does some crazy stuff, but he is very good at punching it in from inside the 3-yard line. So I don't know that Brian Robinson has. I would definitely make him the favorite to your point, but also when I did my research, one of the least sticky stats year over year for running backs is carries inside the 5. So I think when you look at it, I don't think we should be overconfident in either one of these guys getting that role.
Again, I think the bigger issue is the potential for Daniels dual threat ways to really just take away the upside of this backfield. We've seen that in Philly and Baltimore over the years, where legit top 10 scoring offenses that are bottom 10 in terms of expected RB PPR points because the quarterback scrambles instead of checking down. And they also factor into the rushing equation near the goal line. So overall, just, 55 quarterbacks with at least 80 carries over the past decade. Only 27% of their RBs posted top 12 finishes, 51% top 24. So, hey, again, both running backs priced outside the top 30. I think they make for very good zero RB candidates. And honestly, man, the Tennessee running backs, the Washington running backs, and there's another group kind of priced around there. But the one thing I will say, as much as Ekeler is the more, viable 3-down running back, we know he can do that. He can be that, bell cow if asked. Brian Robinson has looked decent enough as a receiver over the years. And God forbid, not saying ESPN's advanced receiver ratings are, the greatest thing on the planet, but ranking very, very highly, in terms of what he was asked to do last year. So like if Ekeler gets hurt, man, Brian Robinson, I think could take over that backfield and actually, boom up into something like a weekly top 15 ranking. We shall see. But final note, guys, if you want to fade Austin Ekeler, do it, but please don't do it because of that 113-mile-per-hour run against the Packers last year. My man hit 19.6 in week 1 against the Dolphins before he suffered a high ankle sprain, and that's faster than anything Josh Jacobs did all season. So if you want to hold, next-gen stats, miles per hour reached against a running back, then make sure you're actually spreading it out, not letting one freaking bad run, have the entire thing. Just a little pet peeve of mine there, Dwayne. Now for arguably the main event. Nah, I'm just a Columbus, Ohio Buckeye homer. But Terry McLaurin, no doubt wide receiver 1. Although that's been true for the better part of the last half decade, Dwayne still hasn't quite produced all that great of fantasy results. Not bad, but overall in 5 seasons in the league, Terry's finished as the wide receiver 29, 20, 30, 23, and 36 in terms of PPR points per game. So in this one, we talked about the dual threat quarterbacks, and guess what? That's not great for the wide receivers as well. But we also need to keep in mind the potential for Daniels to, let's face it, probably not be that great of a passer as a rookie. We've had 41 offenses have a rookie quarterback start at least 10 games since 2010. Just 5 of 41 wide receivers finished in the top 12. Maybe we'll bring this up again for a certain Minnesota Vikings wide receiver. Only 32% were the top 24. Average finish wide receiver 33, median finish wide receiver 35. So like Robinson and Ekeler, like I'm not giving you guys these stats and saying like, oh, we now just cannot draft Terry, because guess what? Terry's already going outside the top 30 wide receivers. But I do, Dwayne, struggle when, we always have these conversations towards the end of the offseason. Do you really think we're going to be sitting here in December going, my God, I'm not in any of my fantasy playoffs. I mess up all my chances of winning because I didn't draft Terry McLaurin. I don't quite think he's going to be that case.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Is there a chance of it? Yeah, but we know what Terry McLaurin is at this point. He's a wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 3. We've seen this type of profile come along many times, and it's really hard for them to suddenly turn into a wide receiver 1. Like Amari Cooper is a better version of Terry McLaurin, stuck in wide receiver 2. Tyler Lockett occasionally had one of those seasons where he blows up. He gets the wide receiver 1 finish. Mostly going to be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. That's not bad. Terry McLaurin's good. And if somehow Jayden Daniels does impress us and he overperforms our expectations, which, like I said earlier, only 3,400 yards passing, right around there is what we've got them projected for. If he beats that, it's obviously going to help Terry McLaurin. But the problem for McLaurin is he's never really shown that ability to be an absolute alpha. If you're going to play on an offense that might only throw for 3,500 yards, you need to be able to come out and earn a 30% target share. And we've just never seen that gear from Terry McLaurin. So I think it's really hard to forecast that at this point.
29 in September too, man. One of those guys that was a little bit older coming out. That's not necessarily, this horrible age cliff number, but not ideal. Please, Jayden, please free Terry McLaurin. Maybe hang out with him a little bit. That'd be a good start. Like every time I hear Jayden Daniels, he's, chilling with Brandon Ayuk. So my God, that'd really be something. Here's the hoping that no trades like that go down before we get this published. But, Dwain, in addition to Daniels and Ekeler, and again, all these new personnel, additions to Washington, obviously had some major changes going on with the coaching staff. Dan Quinn taking over as head coach, but now Kliff Kingsbury back from Thailand in a 1-year stint at USC to go ahead and run this offense. So what can you tell us, Dwain, about the utilization, pace, things of that nature that we saw from Kingsbury's Cardinals teams and what that might mean for the Washington Commanders in 2024?
Yeah, so Kingsbury, he was a very up-tempo offense, whenever he was in Arizona, 65.5 plays per game over his last 3 years there. So that's elite. So they're coming up, I think, in plays per game. There's some room for them to come up. Here's the challenge. What I found to be the most sticky thing when you're forecasting plays per game, the number one factor is, guess what? Your quarterback. Your quarterback needs to be good, competent. You need to be able to trust them to do that. The other thing that does factor into it is your game script. You look at Washington right now, Vegas has them at 6.5 wins. So they do project some trailing. So that can sometimes lead to a little bit more volume as well. But the biggest thing is the quarterback and then the coaching staff. So I think a lot of this still comes all back to Jayden Daniels. How is he looking in training camp? How comfortable are they with him? But we know that it's in the bag for Kliff Kingsbury. He wants to run a more up-tempo offense. And if Jayden Daniels can show that he's got mastery of it, he has the line of scrimmage, they're going to run a lot of no huddle, and he's up to all that, then yeah, I think we could see a pretty big increase in plays per game for this team. Last year, they were at 61.9. Right now, I've got them projected a little bit over that, but they could be more like a 63, 64. But again, it all comes back to Jayden Daniels, and he's going to need to prove that to us first.
Would note that as much as when Kingsbury kind of came in, it was like, oh my God, air raid now coming into the NFL. Yeah, they threw the ball a lot, but 62.4% raw pass play rate was, just 11th in the NFL. So not necessarily expecting Daniels to be throwing the ball all over the yard, especially if that offensive line, fails to make a meaningful improvement. PFF's rating 24th ranked group, only returning 2 starters. They did go ahead and take away the Cowboys center, Tyler Biadasz. Sorry. Yeah, can't pronounce the center's last name right. Shoot me, everyone. But then
Tyler Biadasz.
There we go. Thank you, Dwain. And then third,
we called him Badass in Dallas. Tyler Badass. That's
okay. I like that. I'm sticking with that one now. And then third round TCU offensive lineman Brandon Coleman as well. So maybe they step in and help things. We've seen dual threat quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson certainly help an offensive line and what they're actually supposed to do. But yeah, for a quarterback that has some very questionable numbers under pressure, not exactly the best ingredient to potentially have a faulty offensive line there. So you mentioned the win total, Dwain, at 6.5, minus 120, lean on the over, plus 900 in the division. Vegas is telling us it's the Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders, and Giants, and I happen to agree with them. That said, I will not be taken over. Give me under 6.5 wins, reigning 32nd ranked scoring defense. I mean, look, their defensive tackle room is great, but I don't think there's a single other position group on this team that you could even remotely call great or elite. Obviously, they traded both their, stud defensive ends at the trade deadline last year, and I just don't see the meaningful improvements on that side of the ball, and I'm not confident enough in a rookie quarterback taking this offense to super great heights with an offensive coordinator that, let's face it, was pretty underwhelming during his time with the Cardinals. So I know 6.5 is a small number. I'm still taking under.
Man, some of these are really hard. Like you're getting forced. Like this is not a bet I want to make. If I had to take one though, I do think I take the under. You still got the Cowboys in the division. You still got the Eagles. I mean, yeah, it's tough. And you got a lot of change going on. You got a new head coach, new offensive coordinator. You got a new quarterback. So, yeah, I'm with you. Two quick things on Kliff Kingsbury: 11% and 9% drop back rate over expectation.
Okay.
The last 2 years with the Cardinals. So has shown to be a pass heavy guy, but now playing under a defensive minded head coach and Dan Quinn. A lot of times we will see the head coach being the guy really making more of that from the top down, saying, "Hey, great, like you can toy around with 5 or 6%, but we're going to run the ball."
And also, it makes sense that Kliff would have increased that once they got Hopkins and once they had, Kyler in there for more than just this season. So, again, could be pass first, just not expecting them to be top 5 and drop back rate over expected or anything this year. But you know what is going to be a top 5, nay, top 1 moment of my weekend? UFC 303. And what better way to bring in the good vibes and good fights than by hanging out with our friends over at DraftKings? So I can say this, guys, you do not want to miss out on any of the action with our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. It's a banger of a card, literally fire matchups all set to take place in the octagon. Personally, cannot wait for the Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochazka main event. Hey, I've mostly been betting on Poatan. It's been pretty damn good for me other than, the Izzy knockout. Kudos to him, 1-3 all time, but he got the, what do you say? Whoever laughs best. Izzy's always got those, one-liners flowing through him. But I will say, if you rewatch Poatan Yuri 1, Prochazka was winning the first, it's 7-8 minutes of that fight until he wasn't, got clipped. That's how the sport goes. That's why it's so much fun. But truly interesting to see Yuri now a pretty live dog, in my humble opinion. So can't wait for this one. And again, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up, because new customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use our code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, Dwayne, we've hit most of the main players, but still a couple skill position starters we have not got to, specifically the wide receivers behind Terry McLaurin. Now, Jahan Dotson, if you guys were like Dwayne and I, you probably still haven't forgiven him for some of the duds he gave our fantasy rosters last season. Did flash as a rookie, but man, it wasn't
any non-duds.
It was so bad. And, so many of these, like, you can trace it back to an injury, or you can trace it back to, just a quarterback completely nuking the entire offense. I'm not saying Sam Howell was great, but to see Dotson literally earn a team low 12.4 targets per route run and go out there and just give us nothing, man. He broke 1 tackle last season, Dwayne. Tyler Lockett had more missed tackles forced than Jahan Dotson, and this is Dotson's second year in the league. So, yeah, I'm upset. You guys can all tell. But Luke McCaffrey, brother of Christian and Max, don't forget, not every single McCaffrey brother turns into a freaking fantasy god, was added to the team in the 3rd round. And early reports are that it is Luke McCaffrey hanging out with Jayden Daniels if you want to go ahead and do the Stafford Puka Cup breakfast narrative type of thing there. So, Dwayne, we've talked about it. Seems like a relatively low overall pass game ceiling. Not saying I haven't taken Dotson or McCaffrey late in drafts as a stacking partner if I'm trying to build a game stack. When you do 100+ best ball drafts like Dwayne and I, you can always find at least one situation to add these guys. But generally, man, I'm not going out of my way in drafts for any of these Washington wide receivers not named Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, and honestly, we gave Jahan Dotson an excuse after his rookie season, which overall was not great, but he played pretty good late, and he made big plays, and we gave him credit for that, right? We love the data and everything, but we also watched the games, and okay, we saw, and here's what I'll say. The positive is, if you guys follow Matt Harmon, Reception Perception, he still likes Jahan Dotson. And he's talked about, I don't want to put words in Matt's mouth, like how much he likes him, but that he still sees signs of life there. So maybe it can work out. At this point, for me, 12% and 14% adjusted target shares over his first 2 seasons. That really tells me all that I need to know. So Jahan Dotson's going to have to completely surprise me. I'm with you. Only taking him whenever I have got a Jayden Daniels team already going, or I'm looking at a bring back against the Falcons in week 17. Luke McCaffrey is interesting. He's a hard guy to grade in the wide receiver supermodel. This is the kind of guy that I've talked about in my articles that can kind of slip through the cracks, because he didn't convert over to playing wide receiver until later in his career. So that ultimately ends up hurting him in the model. So when I wrote him up, I talked a little bit about this and how, look, he did flash some things. It's not a huge body of work, but there's already been some, talk out of camp that he was playing outside some. So that's the thing I think we want to pay attention to. If suddenly we hear that McCaffrey's getting to work outside and he's not just going to have to be a slot merchant in year 1, maybe he passes Dotson. So I like McCaffrey right now late, But you have to remember, this is a guy that just converted from playing quarterback, and sometimes we see that type of player take a few extra years. Now, it doesn't mean they can't be good. Like Julian Edelman came from that mold, right? We've seen some guys that were quarterbacks. Typically, they played for Bill Belichick, turn into a good wide receiver. So I'm holding out hope for McCaffrey, but it could be tough in year one to expect too much from him. But again, ADP is good on him. So if you're playing in a deeper league, best ball, I'm fine with McCaffrey.
Hey, man, like I'm not going to rule out anyone that was good enough to be a top 100 pick. Luke McCaffrey, Jalen McMillan right now are the two cheapest day two wide receivers that you can get in Fantasyland. So I am with you from that perspective. Final skill position of note is this tight end room. Is it Sinnott? Am I right in that? All right, Ben Sinnott or old man Zach Ertz got the 1 year, $5 million deal. Now, Ben is the second round pick of the equation. So everyone wants to find this year's Sam Laporta, Dwayne, but Sam Laporta was immediately set up for a starting role. Not saying Ben couldn't necessarily win that, but we did see a horrible version of Zach Ertz. Like this dude is dead last in yards per target among all tight ends over the last 2 years. Has not broken a tackle in a decade. We still saw that guy keep Trey McBride on the bench his rookie year and even last year until he got put on IR. Now we can blame that on the Cardinals. We can blame that on, Kliff Kingsbury, who is now the offensive coordinator here, Dwayne. Like, okay, I want Ben Sinnott to go out there and take the job too. Like, yeah, huge RAS score. He did some good things in college as a receiver. We can be excited about the guy, but like, where's the confidence coming from that he's just going to completely displace Zach Ertz here?
Yeah, I think it's tough. Like, and again, I think to your point, it's recency bias. But last year, remember, we were touting Laporta and some of the rookie tight ends because their talent profiles. Laporta's talent profile coming in way better than Ben Sinnott. Now, did Sinnott get taken in the second round? Yeah, but he was not near the player that Laporta or even Michael Mayer from last year's class. Yeah. Like this is a very, very, very big downgrade from those guys. Now, could he eventually turn into a player like that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Wallman, a guy that we love that grinds film, he actually loved Ben Sinnott, and he was on him way before really a lot of the other draft pundits were out there, and he talked about how this was a player that he really liked. So I think long term it could be there. I think the question you have to ask yourself is if you're playing in redraft, I'm not touching Sinnott. Like I'm just not, or Zach Ertz for that matter. If I'm playing in best ball, like I'll occasionally take Ertz if I'm not sure about my tight ends early in the season and maybe he plays the first 8 games. But if I'm looking for the guy that I think is probably going to be on the field, we just talked about, their win totals at 6.5. We both took the under. Sinnott's probably playing by week 17, 16. He's probably the starter getting all the snaps because they're going to want to see what they have. So I think you got to just really think about the type of league you're in. The other plus for these two tight ends is we just talked about Dotson and McCaffrey. No for sure thing with either one of those either. I will say, with Zach Ertz, I get it. Super old and crusty, but you get to play against a lot of zone coverage. I mean, this dude last year had a 23% targets per route run, and it's like no one even cares. I get it. 34 years old, but tight end is a position where we've seen if you've got that trust with the quarterback and you know how to sit down in those zones and you become the guy they trust on third down, you can rack up some targets. So it also would not surprise me if early in the season, I think it probably fades Ian by the end of the year, but he could be, I don't want to call him Thielen because Thielen was so nuts at the beginning of last year, but he could be like a poor man's version at tight end of Adam Thielen last year, where we look up and you and I are doing the Sunday night pod on week 4. And we're like, Zach Ertz is still tight end 6. How long is this going to last? Like I could still see that happen.
I mean, dude, he had 10 plus targets in 9 of 28 games with the Cardinals. Kingsbury, low ADOT offense, the zone beaters like you're talking about. I know we have it in our mind that upside in fantasy football has to be these 4-4 guys who can, have the one hitter quitter, 70-yard touchdowns. But hey, guys, in full PPR, we'll take Zach Ertz's 9 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown over 1 catch for 60 yards and a touchdown. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm with you on Ertz potentially, surprising at least early in the season. So again, Sinnott, not trying to shit on the guy. He's only going pick 171. I think sometimes I get caught up a little more in the deep fantasy echo chamber and everything like that. So, hey, he won part of my takes best fullback award, the low man award. That's awesome. Had, 676 yards and 6 touchdowns. He did spend heavy majority of his snaps in line, so I'm not worried about him being, a fullback at the next level or anything. But again, Zach Ertz, call him a, progress stopper all you want. I think he is going to be the lead tight end in Washington, at least for this year. So would invite everyone, if you want to, stay up to date with all things with the Washington Commanders, follow at 32 Beat Writers, at Coach Speak Index, and at Ben Standig, STANDIG, for more great info on Washington. And Dwayne, takes us to the critically acclaimed portion of the show. I made that up, but this is where we comp the Commanders to a TV or movie character. I will start off, and I'm going to go with this version being Ted Lasso. We got new ownership and a team direction from actually people that aren't even familiar with the sport. When Lions OC Ben Johnson, didn't take the job, he actually said that owner Josh Harris and partners Magic Johnson and David Blitzer are quote unquote basketball guys. So this is a once proud team that has largely been a disaster in recent memory. The perennial loser is thinking outside the box and going with a brand new direction with people running it that maybe don't even know what's going on in the football field. So, hey, it worked out, when Peacock was doing it. Call me, a glass half empty hater. Yeah, I don't think it's going to work out here in Washington. I don't know, Dwayne. Hasn't quite worked out here at all, but new ownership, new team. Maybe, just maybe, the Commanders can turn things around. Football is more fun when we have really good teams in it, so I will be rooting for them from that perspective. You got one here?
I'll go with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You get the new quarterback arriving. He happens to, if you think back to Will Smith wearing the backwards hat, that is going to actually be Dan Quinn, though. So we kind of have like one person sharing, one character across two people. And, Terry McLaurin, I guess we can give him Carlton, I mean, a good secondary piece to a show, right? Can't carry the show on his own, but like he definitely contributes. So I'll go with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Washington's they've always had that band with some of the catchy songs as well. And Fresh Prince, one of the best, opening theme songs ever. So
that is a great one.
We're, I'm not sure if any of these are hitting Dwayne. Our listeners are probably just like, well, you two shut up.
Yeah, they probably think we're complete idiots, and I agree with them. They should write in and give us better ones. Like, we'll take it.
Please comment, like, subscribe. Do whatever you want. It's a free country after all.
Ian did prepare for these. I didn't. Just so,
Dwayne's going off the cuff. I was just scrolling, bro, like the top 250 IMDb
yours are really good. Yours
TV shows and movies, just trying to get the spark. But yeah, guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life podcast. Again, you can check out my full column on the Washington Commanders team preview on fantasylife.com. Also, Dwayne's projections, also the Fantasy Life consensus ranks, all for free. Again, that's fantasylife.com, where you can also subscribe to our free newsletter as well. So again, subscribe and follow Fantasy Life on YouTube for more of these as we get ready for draft season. And otherwise, just have a great freaking day. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to Fantasy Life Podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody.